The small town of Riverview wasn't known for producing musical geniuses. It was the kind of place where Friday night football games were the highlight of the week, and the local diner served the same special every Tuesday for the past 30 years. In this quiet corner of the Midwest, 14-year-old Sophia Chen walked through life trying her best not to stand out. On this particular Monday morning, Sophia hurried down the hallway of Riverview High, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her backpack hanging heavily from one shoulder. She wasn't late, she was never late, but she always moved with purpose, as if trying to slip through the world unnoticed. "Watch it," a boy called out as she nearly collided with him at the corner. "Sorry," she mumbled, ducking her head and continuing toward her music class. The music room at Riverview High was nothing special, just an ordinary classroom with acoustic panels haphazardly attached to the walls, a collection of mismatched chairs and an old upright piano that had seen better days. But to Sophia, this room was both a sanctuary and a challenge, a place where she could be close to what she loved, while carefully hiding just how much it meant to her. Mrs. Winters, the music teacher, was writing on the whiteboard when Sophia slipped into her usual seat in the back row. Her gray-streaked hair was tied in a loose bun, and her flowing skirt swished as she turned to face the class. "Good morning, everyone. As you all know, our annual spring showcase is coming up in 3 weeks," Mrs. Winters announced, her voice carrying the same enthusiasm she'd had for the past 20 years of teaching. "This year, Principal Rodriguez has invited several important guests, including representatives from the State Arts Foundation." A murmur rippled through the classroom. The State Arts Foundation was a big deal. They provided scholarships and opportunities that rarely found their way to small towns like Riverview. "So, who's ready to sign up for a performance slot?" Mrs. Winters asked, brandishing a clipboard with a sign-up sheet. The classroom fell silent. A few students glanced at each other uncomfortably. The band kids shifted in their seats. The choir members suddenly found the floor incredibly interesting. "Come on, people. This is a wonderful opportunity," Mrs. Winters encouraged, her smile unwavering despite the lack of enthusiasm. Sophia kept her eyes down, tracing the wood grain pattern on her desk with her finger. She knew what would happen if she volunteered. People would stare. They would talk. They would expect things from her. And expectations were dangerous things. Anyone? Mrs. Winters' voice had taken on a slight edge of desperation, another beat of silence. "I guess I could play something," offered Tommy from the front row, a lanky boy who had been taking guitar lessons for all of 3 months. Mrs. Winters' face brightened momentarily, but even she couldn't hide her concern. "That's wonderful, Tommy. What piece were you thinking of playing?" I've been working on Smoke on the Water," he replied, causing a few snickers around the room. Mrs. Winters nodded politely. "That's a start. Anyone else?" The silence that followed was painful. Sophia could feel the disappointment radiating from her teacher. Mrs. Winters had been the one person who had shown genuine interest in Sophia's musical abilities, even though Sophia had done everything possible to downplay them. Sophia thought about the upcoming showcase. She thought about her grandmother who had passed away last year, leaving behind the only piano Sophia was able to practice on regularly. She thought about how her grandmother would have wanted her to share her gift, not hide it away like some shameful secret. Before she could stop herself, Sophia's hand was in the air. Mrs. Winters' eyes widened slightly. "Sophia, you'd like to perform?" All heads turned toward the back of the room. Sophia immediately regretted her decision, but it was too late to back out now. "I could play piano," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "That would be wonderful." Mrs. Winters beamed, quickly writing Sophia's name on the clipboard before she could change her mind. "I have the perfect piece for you, something simple but lovely that will showcase the piano nicely." Sophia nodded, already feeling her stomach twist with anxiety. Simple. That was good. Simple meant safe. Simple meant she could play well enough to satisfy Mrs. Winters without revealing too much. After class, Mrs. Winters called Sophia over to her desk and handed her a sheet of music. Mozart's Sonata in C major, just the first movement. It's straightforward but beautiful. Sophia took the music, recognizing it immediately as a piece typically given to beginners or early intermediate students. She had played it years ago when she was 7. "Do you think you'll be able to learn it in 3 weeks?" Mrs. Winters asked kindly. "Yes," Sophia replied, not mentioning that she could probably sight read it perfectly right now if asked. Excellent. The practice rooms are available during lunch and after school if you need them, Mrs. Winters offered. Sophia nodded her thanks and tucked the music into her folder. As she turned to leave, Mrs. Winters added, I'm really proud of you for volunteering, Sophia. It takes courage to perform in front of others. If only her teacher knew the real reason she kept her playing private. After school that day, Sophia didn't head home immediately. Instead, she made her way to the community center 3 blocks from school. The building was old but well-maintained, with a small sign out front advertising various activities and resources for local residents. Inside, past the front desk where Mr. Patel gave her a friendly nod of recognition, was a small room with a decent upright piano. It wasn't the grand piano her grandmother had owned, the one Sophia had spent countless hours playing until her fingers ached, but it was better than nothing. And most importantly, it was private. The community center allowed her to reserve the room twice a week, no questions asked. Sophia closed the door behind her and sat on the bench, placing her backpack on the floor. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them, feeling the familiar smoothness beneath her fingertips. Then she reached into her folder and pulled out the Mozart piece Mrs. Winters had given her. She played through it once, her fingers moving effortlessly across the keys. The piece was indeed simple, pleasant and melodic, but lacking the depth and complexity she craved. When she finished, she sat in silence for a moment, then played it again, this time adding subtle embellishments and dynamics that transformed the beginner piece into something more nuanced. But halfway through, she stopped abruptly. No, this wouldn't do. She couldn't play it like this at the showcase. It would raise too many questions. The truth was, Sophia Chen wasn't just good at piano, she was exceptional. By age 10, she had mastered pieces that college students struggled with. Her grandmother, a former piano teacher, had recognized her talent early and nurtured it carefully, finding her advanced instruction through online lessons with respected teachers who were amazed by the young girl's abilities. But then came the incident in 6th grade. After performing at a regional competition, where she'd played a challenging Chopin piece and won first place, everything changed. The other kids looked at her differently. They called her piano freak and show-off. They mimicked her playing with exaggerated hand gestures and mock-serious expressions. Even some parents seemed uncomfortable, whispering about pushy families and robbing children of their childhood. That's when Sophia decided it was easier to hide. Her parents, noticing her distress, didn't push her to continue competing. Her grandmother understood but kept encouraging her to play privately, telling her, "Music is your voice, Sophia. Even if you whisper for now, never stop speaking." Now her grandmother was gone, and so was her piano. The family house felt emptier without both. Sophia sighed and put the Mozart piece away. From her backpack, she pulled out a worn notebook filled with handwritten music, her own compositions. She flipped to her latest piece, a complex work inspired by her grandmother's life story, from her childhood in China to her journey to America. It was filled with technical challenges that pushed even Sophia's abilities. But more importantly, it was filled with emotion. Love, loss, hope, and memory. For the next hour, she lost herself in her own creation, playing sections over and over, making small adjustments, feeling the music flow through her like a living thing. This was her real practice, her true voice, but one she kept hidden from the world. As the afternoon light began to fade, Sophia reluctantly closed her notebook. She had to be home for dinner soon, and she still had homework to finish. As she packed up her things, she glanced at the Mozart piece again. It would be easy enough to play it exactly as written for the showcase, to be adequate but unremarkable, to stay safe in her invisibility. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice that sounded remarkably like her grandmother's whispered that perhaps it was time to stop hiding. She shook her head, dismissing the thought. One step at a time. She had volunteered to play, and that was brave enough for now. The simple piece would be fine. What Sophia didn't know as she left the community center that evening was that Mrs. Winters had more in mind than just a school showcase. She didn't know about the special guest who would be attending, someone who could change everything. And she certainly didn't know that in just 3 weeks her carefully constructed ordinary life would be turned completely upside down, all because she had raised her hand in music class. The Chen family dinner table used to be filled with laughter and stories. These days it was mostly quiet, punctuated only by the clink of forks against plates and occasional requests to pass the salt. Tonight was no different. How was school? Sophia's father asked, his eyes tired from another long day at the hardware store where he now worked. Just 18 months ago, he had owned the business. Now he was just another employee, working for the corporation that had bought him out when the debts became too much. Fine, Sophia replied, pushing rice around her plate. She hadn't mentioned volunteering for the showcase. It would only lead to questions she didn't want to answer. Her mother glanced up from her barely touched dinner. Did you finish your math homework? Almost, Sophia said. I'll complete it after dinner. More silence followed. None of them mentioned the empty chair where Sophia's grandmother used to sit. None of them talked about the bare corner of the living room where her beautiful Yamaha grand piano once stood. Some absences were too painful to acknowledge. After dinner, Sophia helped clear the table. As she rinsed dishes, her mother came beside her with a dish towel. I found this while going through some boxes today, her mother said quietly, pulling an envelope from her pocket. It's addressed to you, from Grandma. Sophia dried her hands and took the envelope. Her grandmother's elegant handwriting spelled out her name. The paper felt thin, like it might dissolve if she held it too tightly. I'll read it later, Sophia whispered, tucking it into her jeans pocket. That night, sitting cross-legged on her bed, Sophia finally opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, dated just 2 weeks before her grandmother's unexpected stroke. My dearest Sophia, the letter began. Music is not just about the notes we play, but about the courage to play them when it matters most. Your gift was never meant to be hidden away. When the right moment comes, I hope you'll remember that true musicians don't just play with their hands, they play with their hearts. Tears blurred Sophia's vision. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in her music notebook. The next morning, Sophia arrived at school early and slipped into the music room. Mrs. Winters wasn't there yet, but the door was unlocked. The room was peaceful in the morning light, dust particles dancing in the sunbeams that streamed through the windows. She sat at the old upright piano, placing the Mozart piece on the stand. She began to play, allowing her fingers to flow through the simple melody as written. It was pleasant enough, but empty, like reciting words without understanding their meaning. You play beautifully, a voice said from the doorway. Sophia jumped, her hands flying off the keys. A man she didn't recognize stood watching her. He wasn't very tall, with salt and pepper hair and a tweed jacket that seemed too warm for the spring weather. A visitor badge hung from his lapel. I'm sorry to startle you, he said with a slight accent she couldn't place. The door was open and I heard music. I was just practicing, Sophia said, gathering the sheet music quickly. For the showcase. The man nodded, stepping into the room. I'm Professor Takahashi. I teach at the State Conservatory. Sophia felt her pulse quicken. The State Conservatory was the most prestigious music school in the region. Students traveled from all over the country to study there. Mrs. Winters invited me to judge the showcase, he continued, approaching the piano. But I came early to give a masterclass for advanced students at the community college nearby. Sophia nodded politely, wishing she could disappear. Had he noticed her playing wasn't just a student working through a piece, but someone who could have played it in her sleep? Professor Takahashi glanced at the music on the stand. Mozart, a fine choice, though I sensed you find it insufficient? Heat rose to Sophia's cheeks. Was she that transparent? It's a nice piece, she said diplomatically. Professor Takahashi smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Nice, yes, like a sunny day without a cloud. Pleasant, but not particularly memorable. He reached into his leather messenger bag and pulled out a folder of sheet music. After flipping through several pages, he selected one and placed it on the stand. This might interest you more. Sophia looked at the title. Firebird's Lament by H. Takahashi. You wrote this? She asked, scanning the complex notation. Yes, it's part of a suite I composed last year. This movement has proven challenging for most of my students. The piece was indeed complex, shifting time signatures, intricate runs, emotional dynamics that required both technical skill and interpretive depth. May I? Professor Takahashi gestured to the bench beside her. Sophia moved over and he sat down, his hands hovering over the keys. It begins with the bird in captivity, he explained, playing a haunting, restrained melody with his right hand while his left created a cage-like pattern of repeating notes. Then comes the moment when the bird remembers it once knew how to fly. His playing transformed, becoming more urgent, more alive. The melody soared and dipped, fought against constraints, and finally broke free in a cascade of notes that made Sophia's breath catch. He stopped abruptly, leaving the piece unfinished. That's all I'll share for now. The rest depends on whether the bird chooses freedom or returns to its cage. The metaphor wasn't lost on Sophia. She stared at the sheet music, memorizing the patterns, hearing the continuation in her mind. "May I borrow this?" she asked quietly. Professor Takahashi looked at her thoughtfully. "Keep it, consider it a gift." He stood up, checking his watch. "I should find Mrs. Winters before my first class." "It was a pleasure meeting you, Sophia," she supplied. "Sophia," he repeated, nodding. "I look forward to hearing you play at the showcase." After he left, Sophia remained at the piano, studying the complex composition. Part of her wanted to try it immediately, to see if she could master its challenges. The other part, the cautious part that had protected her for years, warned her to stick with the Mozart. When Mrs. Winters arrived 20 minutes later, Sophia was diligently practicing the simple sonata as assigned. "Good morning, Sophia. I see you're already working hard," Mrs. Winters said cheerfully. "How's it coming along?" "Fine," Sophia replied. "I think I'll be ready for the showcase." "Wonderful. Oh, did you happen to see a visitor this morning?" "Professor Takahashi from the conservatory was supposed to meet me here. He came by briefly," Sophia said, not mentioning their conversation or the sheet music now hidden in her backpack. "He said he was going to look for you." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of school, homework, and practice. At school, Sophia dutifully played the Mozart piece whenever Mrs. Winters was around. But in the privacy of the community center's practice room, she devoted herself to Firebird's Lament. The piece challenged her in ways she hadn't been challenged in years. It required not just technical precision but emotional vulnerability, something Sophia had carefully avoided in her playing since the incident. To play it properly meant revealing too much of herself. At home, things grew increasingly tense. Her father was working longer hours, her mother had started taking night shifts at the hospital cafeteria, and bills still piled up on the kitchen counter. The letter from the bank that Sophia wasn't supposed to see, but did, mentioned foreclosure possibilities if payments weren't brought current within 60 days. One evening, a week before the showcase, Sophia's father came home later than usual. His expression was strangely light, as if a burden had been lifted. "I have news," he announced during dinner. "I've been offered a manager position at the Westfield store." "Westfield?" Sophia's mother repeated. "But that's over 3 hours away." "It comes with a significant pay increase," he explained. "And they have affordable housing for employees. We could make a fresh start." "When would we move?" Sophia asked, her stomach nodding. "They need me to start in 3 weeks," her father replied. "It's short notice, but it's the opportunity we've been waiting for." 3 weeks. Right after the showcase, just as she was finding her musical voice again. That night, Sophia took out both pieces of music, the simple Mozart sonata and Professor Takahashi's complex composition. Side by side, they represented a choice: continue hiding her true abilities and move away quietly, or finally embrace her gift and face the consequences. She thought about her grandmother's letter, about the piano they had sold, about the years of hiding, about Professor Takahashi's words regarding the Firebird's choice between freedom and captivity. The showcase was in 7 days. She had a decision to make. What Sophia didn't know was that her choice would not only determine her musical future, but would set in motion events that could change her family's circumstances entirely. The simple school performance she had reluctantly volunteered for was about to become the most important moment of her young life. 6 days before the showcase, Sophia sat alone in the community center's practice room, her fingers hovering over the keys of the upright piano. Outside, rain pattered against the windows, creating a gentle rhythm that seemed to match her uncertain heartbeat. On the music stand sat both pieces, the Mozart sonata and Professor Takahashi's Firebird's Lament. 2 paths, 2 possible futures. She began to play the Mozart piece, her fingers moving automatically through the familiar patterns. It was safe, predictable. No one would look twice if she played this at the showcase. She would be just another student performing just another piece before moving away to Westfield. But halfway through, she stopped. The silence that followed felt heavy, accusing. "That's not who you are," she whispered to herself, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. Taking a deep breath, she positioned her hands differently and began to play the opening measures of Firebird's Lament. The mournful, constrained melody spoke to something deep inside her, the part of herself she had locked away for years. As she reached the section where Professor Takahashi had stopped playing, her fingers hesitated briefly. Beyond this point, she would be interpreting the piece based on her own understanding of what should come next. The bird remembering flight, breaking free from its cage, she played on, losing herself in the music, allowing her emotions to guide her hands. The frustration of hiding, the pain of losing her grandmother, the fear of what came next, all of it flowed into the piece, transforming it from notes on a page into something living and breathing. When she finally played the last note, letting it hang in the air before fading away, she realized her cheeks were wet with tears. "Excuse me? Your time is almost up, but someone canceled the next slot if you'd like to stay longer." Sophia jumped at the voice and turned to see Ms. Patel, the community center coordinator, standing in the doorway. "Oh, thank you," Sophia replied, quickly wiping her eyes. "I'd like to stay if that's okay." Ms. Patel nodded, but instead of leaving, she stepped further into the room. "I've worked here for 15 years, she said, "and I've never heard anyone play like that on this old piano." Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I was just practicing." "That wasn't just practicing," Ms. Patel said gently. "That was something special." She hesitated, then added, "Your grandmother used to talk about your playing, you know, before she passed." Sophia looked up, surprised. "She did?" Ms. Patel nodded. "She would come in for her book club meetings and tell us how her granddaughter played like she had music running through her veins instead of blood." She smiled at the memory. "She was very proud of you." After Ms. Patel left, Sophia sat in silence, thinking about her grandmother, about the choices ahead, about what it might mean to finally stop hiding. The next day at school, Mrs. Winters caught Sophia after music class. "How's the Mozart coming along? The showcase is just 5 days away now." "It's fine," Sophia replied automatically. Mrs. Winters studied her face for a moment. "Just fine? Is there something wrong with the piece?" Sophia hesitated. "No, it's a nice piece, but I was wondering if I could play something else instead." Mrs. Winters raised her eyebrows. "Something else? Like what?" "It's called Firebird's Lament. Professor Takahashi composed it." Recognition flickered in Mrs. Winters' eyes. "That's a very advanced piece, Sophia. I've heard his students at the conservatory perform it. Are you sure you're ready for something so challenging?" This was Sophia's moment of truth. She could back down now, say she'd stick with the Mozart after all, or she could finally admit what she'd been hiding. "I can play it," she said quietly but firmly. "I've been practicing piano since I was 4. My grandmother was my teacher until I was 10, and then I took online lessons from a professor at the Eastman School of Music for 2 years." Mrs. Winters' mouth opened slightly in surprise. "But why haven't you ever—" "Because I didn't want to stand out," Sophia admitted. "After a competition in 6th grade, kids made fun of me, called me names, so I stopped showing what I could really do." Understanding dawned on Mrs. Winters' face. "And now you're ready to play as yourself again?" Sophia nodded slowly. "I think so." Mrs. Winters' expression softened. "Then by all means, play the piece that speaks to you." For the next 4 days, Sophia practiced with a renewed purpose. At home, her parents were busy with moving preparations, calling about rental properties in Westfield, and starting to pack non-essential items. They noticed Sophia's increased focus on the upcoming performance, but attributed it to normal pre-show jitters. The night before the showcase, Sophia's father knocked on her bedroom door. She quickly closed her music notebook where she'd been making notes on her interpretation of Firebird's Lament. "Hey, kiddo," he said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Nervous about tomorrow?" "A little," she admitted. "You'll do great," he assured her. "We're looking forward to hearing you play." Guilt gnawed at Sophia. She hadn't told her parents about switching pieces. They were expecting a simple, pleasant Mozart sonata, not a complex, emotionally demanding modern composition that would reveal years of secret practice. Dad, she began hesitantly, there's something I should tell you about tomorrow. But before she could continue, her father's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. It's the store manager in Westfield. I need to take this. As he left the room, Sophia sighed. It would have to wait until tomorrow. They would find out along with everyone else. The morning of the showcase dawned bright and clear. Sophia woke early, her mind already racing with thoughts of the performance ahead. She dressed carefully in the outfit she'd selected, a simple blue dress that had once belonged to her grandmother, altered by her mother to fit her. At breakfast, her parents wished her luck, promising they would be in the audience despite needing to continue packing that afternoon. Her mother tucked a small pin shaped like a piano into Sophia's hair. A little something to carry with you on stage, she explained. Your grandmother would have wanted you to have it. At school, the atmosphere was charged with excitement. The annual spring showcase was one of the biggest events of the year, and the auditorium was being transformed with decorations and equipment. Mrs. Winters found Sophia in the hallway. Professor Takahashi is here, she said. He asked if you would be willing to speak with him before the performance. Sophia followed Mrs. Winters to a small classroom that had been set up as a green room for performers. Professor Takahashi stood by the window thumbing through a program. Ah, Sophia, he said when he saw her. Mrs. Winters tells me you're playing my piece today. Sophia nodded, suddenly nervous in his presence. Yes, I hope that's all right. More than all right, he replied with a slight smile. But I must admit I'm curious. That piece is normally performed by advanced conservatory students. Mrs. Winters mentioned you've been somewhat secretive about your abilities. Sophia looked down. I wasn't ready for people to know. And now? Now I think I need to stop hiding, she said, meeting his gaze. My family is moving away soon. This might be my last chance to play for this audience. I want to leave them with something real. Professor Takahashi nodded thoughtfully. Music is truth spoken in a language beyond words. To play honestly is to reveal oneself. He paused. Have you considered what comes after truth is revealed? Sophia shook her head. I'm just focused on getting through today. Fair enough, he replied. But remember this, when a bird finally leaves its cage, the world suddenly becomes much larger than it ever imagined. As the morning progressed, Sophia watched other students perform their pieces, some well-rehearsed, others clearly nervous. Tommy played his guitar rendition of Smoke on the Water, which received polite applause. The choir performed a medley of pop songs that had the audience clapping along. Backstage, Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she reviewed the sheet music one last time. Though she had memorized every note weeks ago, through the curtain she could hear the audience's murmurs and occasional laughter. Mrs. Winters approached, program in hand. You're up in 5 minutes after Lily's flute solo. Are you ready? Sophia took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. Your parents are in the 3rd row, Mrs. Winters added with an encouraging smile. And remember, whatever happens out there, I'm proud of you for taking this step. From the stage came the sound of a flute, playing a sweet, simple melody. Soon it would be Sophia's turn to take her place at the piano, not as the girl who had hidden her gift for years, but as the musician her grandmother had always known she could be. In that moment, standing in the wings of the school auditorium, Sophia felt as though she stood at the edge of a precipice. One step would change everything. There would be no going back to invisibility after this. She closed her eyes and listened to her heartbeat, finding in its rhythm the opening notes of Firebird's Lament. It was time. The applause for Lily's flute solo faded as Mrs. Winters stepped onto the stage to introduce the next performer. Next, we have Sophia Chen playing piano. Sophia took a deep breath and walked onto the stage, her grandmother's piano pin catching the light. The auditorium seemed larger than she remembered from rehearsals, filled with faces turned expectantly toward her. In the 3rd row, she spotted her parents. Her mother gave an encouraging smile. Her father nodded slightly. Near the back, Professor Takahashi sat with perfect posture, his expression unreadable. Sophia sat down at the piano, not the old upright from the music room, but a decent baby grand borrowed from the community college for the occasion. The polished black surface reflected the stage lights. She adjusted the bench, placed her hands in her lap, and took another steadying breath. Mrs. Winters leaned in close before stepping away. You've got this, she whispered. The audience settled into an expectant silence. Many of them, teachers, parents, fellow students, thought they knew what was coming. A pleasant, if forgettable, rendition of a simple Mozart piece by a quiet girl who rarely spoke up in class. None of them, except for Mrs. Winters and Professor Takahashi, had any idea what was about to happen. Sophia placed her fingers on the keys. For a moment, she hesitated. She could still play the Mozart piece. It would be easier, safer. Then she remembered her grandmother's words from the letter. Music is not just about the notes we play, but about the courage to play them when it matters most. She began to play. The opening notes of Firebird's Lament filled the auditorium, soft, restrained, but with an undercurrent of tension that was impossible to ignore. The melody spoke of confinement, of wings that longed to spread but couldn't. In the audience, confusion rippled across several faces. This wasn't Mozart. This wasn't a beginner's piece. This was something else entirely. Mrs. Winters, standing in the wings, felt a swell of pride as she watched Sophia's transformation. The girl's normally guarded expression had opened, revealing the intensity beneath. Her body swayed slightly with the music, no longer rigid with self-consciousness but fluid with expression. In the third row, Sophia's parents exchanged puzzled glances. Her mother leaned toward her father. "Did you know she could play like this?" she whispered. Her father shook his head, his expression a mixture of confusion and growing amazement. As Sophia moved into the second section of the piece, where the Firebird begins to remember flight, her playing grew more intense. Her fingers danced across the keys with precision and passion that spoke of countless hours of practice. Years of hiding her talent melted away with each passing measure. The audience sat motionless, captivated. Even the students who had been scrolling on their phones or whispering to friends now stared at the stage, witnessing something none of them had expected. In the back row, Professor Takahashi leaned forward slightly. This was his composition, a piece he'd written during a dark period in his own life when he'd felt trapped by circumstances. He'd performed it dozens of times, heard his best students interpret it, but something about this young girl's playing was different. She wasn't just playing the notes, she was living them. Sophia had reached the crucial transition in the piece, the moment where the Firebird breaks free from its cage. Her hands moved with increasing urgency, building tension through a series of complex runs and chord progressions. The melody soared higher, pushing against constraints, demanding liberation. Then came the breakthrough, a cascade of notes that seemed to tumble over one another like a waterfall, representing the bird's first moments of freedom. Sophia's whole body was part of the performance now, her shoulders rising and falling with the music's breaths, her face alive with emotion. Mrs. Winters found herself holding her breath. Several audience members were doing the same, caught in the spell of the music. In that moment, something shifted in the auditorium. It wasn't just about a talented student surprising everyone with her hidden abilities. It was about witnessing someone's true self emerge after years of hiding, a universal experience that resonated with many in the room. As Sophia played the final section of the piece, the Firebird's flight into a vast, unknown sky. Her interpretation took on qualities even Professor Takahashi hadn't imagined. She added subtle variations to the melody, enhancing the emotional journey without compromising the composition's integrity. The music spoke of fear and exhilaration, of loss and possibility, of leaving the familiar behind to embrace something greater. It was Sophia's story, her grandmother's story, and in some way everyone's story. The final notes hung in the air like a question. What happens after freedom is claimed? Then silence. For 3 full seconds, no one moved or spoke. It was as if the audience needed time to return to reality after being transported by the music. Then, from the back row, Professor Takahashi stood up. He began to applaud, slowly and deliberately at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. Like a wave, the applause spread through the auditorium. Soon everyone was on their feet, teachers, students, parents, their faces showing varying degrees of amazement and appreciation. Sophia's parents stood in stunned silence at first, then joined the ovation. Her mother had tears streaming down her face. Her father's expression had transformed from confusion to something like awe. On stage, Sophia finally looked up, meeting the audience's gaze directly for perhaps the first time. The applause washed over her, not just for her technical skill but for her courage to finally reveal who she truly was. Mrs. Winters appeared at her side, helping her to stand for a proper bow. "I knew you were good," she whispered, "but that was extraordinary." As Sophia took her bow, she caught sight of Professor Takahashi, still applauding. He gave her a small nod that contained volumes of approval and respect. The applause continued longer than for any other performer that day. When it finally began to subside, Sophia made her way backstage on shaky legs, overwhelmed by what had just happened. In the wings, several students who had previously paid little attention to the quiet girl from music class now looked at her differently. Some seemed impressed, others slightly intimidated, a few possibly resentful of being outshone. Tommy, the guitar player, gave her a thumbs up. "Dude, that was insane," he said with genuine admiration. "Why didn't you ever say you could play like that?" Before Sophia could answer, Mrs. Winters appeared at her side. "Sophia, Professor Takahashi would like to speak with you and your parents after the showcase. He was quite moved by your performance." Sophia nodded, still unable to fully process everything that was happening. The rest of the showcase continued, but Sophia hardly registered the other performances. Her mind was spinning with the implications of what she had just done. There was no going back to invisibility now. For better or worse, she had revealed her true self. After the final performance, as the audience began to disperse, Sophia found her parents waiting in the hallway outside the auditorium. Her mother immediately pulled her into a tight hug. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "All this time, I didn't want to be different," Sophia replied simply. "And after we sold Grandma's piano, it seemed pointless to talk about it." Her father stood slightly apart, his expression complex. "That piece you played," he said carefully. "It wasn't the one your teacher assigned, was it?" Sophia shook her head. "Where did you learn to play like that? Who's been teaching you?" Before Sophia could answer, Professor Takahashi approached the family with Mrs. Winters at his side. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen," Mrs. Winters said. "This is Professor Takahashi from the State Conservatory. He composed the piece Sophia played today." Professor Takahashi extended his hand. "Your daughter gave a remarkable performance," he said. "I've rarely heard my composition interpreted with such understanding, especially by someone so young." Sophia's father shook his hand, looking slightly overwhelmed. "Thank you, but we're a bit confused. We knew Sophia took lessons with her grandmother years ago, but we had no idea she continued at this level." Professor Takahashi glanced at Sophia with newfound respect. "She has been keeping her light under a bushel, it seems." He turned back to her parents. "I would like to discuss something with all of you if you have a moment." Mrs. Winters led them to a quiet classroom away from the post-showcase crowds. Once they were seated, Professor Takahashi addressed Sophia directly. "Your performance today revealed not only exceptional technical skill but a rare emotional intelligence. Music is more than notes on a page. It's a language that speaks directly to the human experience. You clearly understand this at a level many trained musicians never achieve." He turned to her parents. "The State Conservatory offers a young artist program for exceptional students. It includes weekly private lessons, ensemble opportunities, and performance master classes. Based on what I heard today, I would like to nominate Sophia for a full scholarship." Sophia's mother gasped softly. Her father leaned forward. "That's very generous," he said cautiously. "But we're actually moving to Westfield in a few weeks. I've accepted a position there." Professor Takahashi nodded thoughtfully. "I see. That is indeed a challenge." He paused, then added, "However, talent like your daughter's is rare enough that I believe we could make arrangements. Westfield is not so far that we couldn't accommodate some form of distance learning, combined with weekend intensive sessions." The conversation continued, discussing possibilities and logistics, but Sophia was only half listening. She was still processing what had happened on that stage, the moment when she had finally stopped hiding and allowed herself to be seen. Whatever came next, whether they moved to Westfield or stayed, whether she joined the conservatory program or found another path, one thing was certain. The Firebird had left its cage, and there was no going back. 2 months after the showcase, Sophia sat at a piano that wasn't hers, in a house that still didn't quite feel like home. The Chen family had moved to Westfield as planned, but with significant changes to their original expectations. The morning sunlight streamed through unfamiliar windows as her fingers moved across the keys of a refurbished upright. Piano not as magnificent as her grandmother's grand, but a vast improvement over nothing. The piano had been delivered last week, a joint investment by her parents and the Young Artists program at the State Conservatory. "You're up early," her mother said, appearing in the doorway with a cup of coffee. She was still in her nightgown, her hair loosely tied back. These days she looked Lee. Sophia smiled without stopping her playing. "Professor Takahashi assigned this piece for next weekend's masterclass. I want to have it polished." Her mother leaned against the doorframe, listening. "It's beautiful." "Debussy?" "Yes, Claire de Lune," Sophia replied, pleased that her mother was learning to recognize different composers. It means moonlight in French. So much had changed since that day at the showcase. The standing ovation, the tears in her mother's eyes, her father's expression of wonder and pride, Professor Takahashi's offer, and most surprisingly, the video that had changed everything. Sophia hadn't known that Mrs. Winters had recorded all the showcase performances, nor did she know that her former music teacher had shared the video of Sophia's performance with several colleagues, one of whom posted it online with the caption, "14-year-old pianist transforms professor's challenging composition into something transcendent." The video had gone viral within music education circles, then spread more widely. It had been viewed over 2 million times now. Comments poured in from around the world, many from musicians who recognized the technical difficulty of the piece, others from ordinary people who simply felt moved by the performance. "Breakfast in 15 minutes, her mother said, turning to leave. "Your father wants to discuss the summer program options before he leaves for work." Sophia nodded, continuing to play as her mother disappeared down the hallway. The house in Westfield was smaller than their old home, but somehow it felt more alive. Music filled the rooms at all hours now, sometimes Sophia practicing, sometimes recordings that her father had started collecting of great pianists throughout history. The move to Westfield had happened as planned. Her father took the manager position at the hardware store, with its better salary and benefits. But unlike their original plan, Sophia now traveled back to her hometown twice a month for intensive weekend sessions at the conservatory's Young Artists program. Staying with her grandmother's old friend, Ms. Patel, the arrangement wasn't ideal. The 3-hour drive each way was tiring, and Sophia missed full days of school that she had to make up. But everyone agreed it was worth it. On weekdays, she continued her studies through online sessions with Professor Takahashi and other conservatory teachers. The most unexpected change had come 3 weeks after the video went viral. When the president of Yamaha's regional division had contacted the family, he explained that the company sometimes sponsored young musicians of exceptional promise, providing them with instruments and performance opportunities. After reviewing Sophia's showcase performance and speaking with Professor Takahashi, they wanted to offer Sophia a piano and a spot in their Young Musicians Fellowship program. That conversation had led to others, which eventually led to her father being offered a position in Yamaha's corporate office, not in Westfield, but back in their original hometown. Just 30 minutes from the conservatory, they would be moving back at the end of summer. Sophia finished the Debussy piece and let the final notes fade into silence. Her thoughts drifted to the upcoming recital, her first official public performance since the showcase. The thought still made her stomach tighten, but the feeling was different now. It wasn't fear of being seen, but the natural nervousness of wanting to do well, to honor the music. "That sounded lovely," her father said, appearing in the doorway where her mother had stood earlier. He was dressed for work in a button-down shirt and slacks, his manager uniform, though soon he would be trading it for business casual attire at Yamaha. "Thanks, Dad," Sophia replied, closing the music book. "I still need to work on the middle section. The tempo keeps rushing." Her father shook his head with a small smile. "It all sounds perfect to me, but what do I know? I'm just learning to tell Mozart from Beethoven." He came into the room and sat in the armchair near the piano. "Your mother said you're up for discussing the summer programs?" Sophia nodded. "I've narrowed it down to 2 options, the Conservatory's Summer Institute or the National Youth Orchestra Camp. Both excellent choices," her father said, "and both with scholarship offers." He paused, a hint of lingering guilt crossing his face. "I'm sorry we couldn't afford these opportunities before." "Dad, stop," Sophia said gently. "It wasn't about money. I wasn't ready before." This was a conversation they'd had several times since the showcase. Her parents, especially her father, still struggled to understand why she had hidden her abilities for so long. They felt they had failed her somehow, not recognizing or nurturing her talent. "I know," he said, "but I still wonder if we should have seen it, should have encouraged you more." "You gave me the space I needed," Sophia replied. "And when I was ready, you supported me completely. That's what matters." The truth was more complicated, of course. Sophia sometimes wondered how different things might have been if she hadn't hidden her abilities, if her grandmother's piano hadn't been sold, if they hadn't faced financial hardship. But she was learning that life rarely followed a straight path, and that sometimes the detours led to unexpected destinations. After breakfast, as her father prepared to leave for work, he handed Sophia an envelope. "This came for you yesterday. I forgot to give it to you." The return address showed the state conservatory. Inside was an official letter inviting Sophia to perform Firebird's Lament at the conservatory's annual gala, alongside performances by faculty and top students. Professor Takahashi had added a handwritten note. "The composer would be honored to accompany you on the second piano for the duet arrangement." "Good news?" her father asked, seeing her expression. "Yes," Sophia said, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "A performance opportunity. A big one." Her father squeezed her shoulder. "You'll be amazing, just like you were at the showcase." After he left for work, Sophia returned to the piano with the letter. The gala would be held in September, just after they moved back to their hometown. It would be a new beginning in a familiar place, a chance to rewrite their family's story. She began to play again, but not Debussy this time. From memory, she played Firebird's Lament, the piece that had changed everything. It felt different now, less about captivity and escape, more about transformation and possibility. As she played, Sophia thought about how a single moment of courage could alter the course of a life. How deciding to stop hiding, to play the challenging piece instead of the simple one, had opened doors she hadn't known existed. Later that afternoon, Sophia had her weekly video lesson with Professor Takahashi. When she mentioned receiving the gala invitation, he nodded, looking pleased. "I hoped it would reach you soon," he said. "The committee was unanimous in their desire to include you." "I'm honored," Sophia replied, "but also nervous about performing with you." Professor Takahashi smiled. "Nerves are natural. They remind us that what we're doing matters." He adjusted his camera slightly. "I have something else to discuss with you, Sophia. The conservatory is considering launching a pre-college program for exceptional students, combining academic education with intensive music training. The board has asked me to help design the curriculum. I mentioned your situation. Your family's moved back to the area, and they're interested in having you join as part of the inaugural class this fall." Sophia's eyes widened. "A full-time music program?" "Yes. You would still complete all academic requirements, but with a schedule built around your musical development. The program would include performance opportunities, composition classes, music theory, everything needed to prepare for conservatory admission." As the conversation continued, outlining possibilities for her future that she had never imagined, Sophia felt a surge of gratitude for her grandmother who had nurtured her gift, for Mrs. Winters who had given her the opportunity to perform, for Professor Takahashi who had challenged her with his composition, and for her parents who were rearranging their lives to support her newly revealed path. Most of all, she felt grateful for that moment of courage when she had chosen the difficult piece over the simple one, when she had decided that being truly seen, with all the risks that entailed, was better than hiding in safety. That evening after dinner, Sophia sat with her parents in their small living room. Her mother was looking through brochures for houses in their old hometown, planning for their return. Her father was reading one of the music appreciation books he had recently purchased. "I've been thinking," Sophia said suddenly, "about starting a music mentorship program at my old school when we move back, for kids who want to learn but can't afford lessons." Her parents looked up, surprised but pleased. "That's a wonderful idea," her mother said. "Your grandmother would have loved that." "We'd support you completely," her father added. Sophia smiled. The future stretched before her like an unwritten piece of music, full of possibilities, challenges, and unexpected harmonies. She was no longer the girl who hid her light, afraid to be seen. She was becoming someone new, someone who understood that gifts were meant to be shared, not hidden away. The simple piano tune she had been assigned all those months ago had been just the beginning. What followed was a composition still being written note by note, day by day, her own unique melody finding its voice in the world.